It's not like any other podcast, coming to you straight from the heartland where investing is told like it is. It's time for Darren Garman's Paranoid Banker Podcast. Hold on, because here comes the next episode of the Paranoid Banker Podcast.
Hey everybody, Darren Garman here, and welcome to this week's podcast where we talk about speed limits. Yep, speed limits. Something that most all of us deal with about every day. There's probably not a day that goes by that you are not worried about. Maybe worry's not the right word. Let's just say thinking about or having to deal with speed limits, because obviously when I talk about speed limits, I'm referring to driving. And at least, if not every day, probably at least a few times a week, most everybody listening to this week's podcast has had to abide by speed limits. Well, I want to talk to you about speed limit, but a different kind of speed limit. And I'm even going to go as far as to tell you that, in truth, you don't have to abide by any damn speed limit because there is none. A lot of times, we impose speed limits on ourselves. That's right, so think about this. A lot of times, we impose speed limits on ourselves. So let me just throw out a few examples, and I'm not bringing up driving, by the way. I'm not going to do that. I'll bring up a couple of real estate examples. I'll bring up a multifamily investment example as a start. So most investors that are looking to buy or invest in their first property, and I'm talking multifamily property now, whether they're going to be active owners or passive owners, feel they need to start with something small. Small. So, not surprisingly, when I hear from those investors, especially those investors that are going to be hands-on, what kind of property do they usually want to buy? That's right. Where can I find a 2-unit? Where can I find a good 4-unit? Where can I find something between 4 to 6 units? While that's not the wrong answer, I will say that's an already self-imposed speed limit. Because the advice I give to most investors, active or passive, is you're starting out way too small. You're thinking way too small here. You're putting in already, you're locking yourself into a self-imposed speed limit. I'll give you another example. I remember, it's been pretty close to 30 years ago when I got into the real estate business. And when I first got in to the real estate business, like a lot of people, I started as a real estate agent. I got my real estate license and started out getting to know real estate, getting to understand it as a realtor or a real estate agent. Well, right out of the blocks, I wanted to get into commercial real estate. Not surprisingly, multifamily. But pretty much every real estate brokerage company and brokerage firm that I interviewed with, what do you think they told me? Well, that's good, but first, you need to sell residential for a year. You need to sell just residential real estate for a couple of years. You should only do residential right away. Why? Well, they had their reasons, which most of it was so you can understand the business and get and process things at a slower rate. Well, that's a speed limit. I didn't like that. And when I got into the real estate business, I jumped right into the world of multifamily and got rid of that speed limit. Yeah, so let's throw out a couple of other speed limit examples. So right now, I'm recording my podcast sitting next to my dog, Bosworth. What do most people think you need to do to have any kind of podcast? Well, you need to have all this equipment, all the fancy microphones, the headphones, all that stuff. Once again, a speed limit. I'm here with my dog Bosworth, and it's me. On top of that, a lot of people think for a podcast you have to have a guest. Oh, you can't have a podcast unless you have a guest. Another speed limit. Okay? So, I was reminded of another one today when talking with my son Isaiah, who is a football player. And as I'm recording this podcast, we're approaching the fall of 2020. And for a lot of football players and a lot of fall sports in college, so he plays college football, there's not going to be any sports. There's no fall sports because of COVID-19. So as a result of that, one of the topics we talked about was, graduating, how long to graduate, when graduation would happen. I mean, that kind of thing. When are you going to graduate? And so we're kind of planning that out a little bit as part of our conversation. And it came up that, it might take him 4 years to graduate, or maybe even a little bit longer. Why? Well, because college is 4 years. It's a 4-year college and 4 years to graduate. I said, bullshit. That's not the case. You can graduate sooner if you wanted to. You don't have to go 4 years. You can get it done faster. The key word, faster. What were we doing when we were having that conversation? We were dealing with self-imposed speed limits again. Okay? So, truth be told, there really are no speed limits for anything. But a lot of us, without even thinking about it, me included, by the way, we tend to put speed limits on ourselves. And it's not helping us. It's slowing us down just like a speed limit is supposed to. When in truth, there are no speed limits. There are no speed limits. So as you sit here and continue listening and hear Bosworth bark in the background, ask yourself this question. The next time a important decision comes up in your life, are you basing your decision that you will make on a self-imposed speed limit? Are you? And really answer that question as honestly as you can. Because one of the things that has worked well for me is to try to do most everything without speed limits. Now, here's one thing I want to mention about it. A lot of times when I talk about this specific topic, people then go to the other side of the spectrum and say, well, now you're just being careless. It's careless to just jump into real estate and go right into multifamily before you learn the business better. It's careless not to take 4 years to go through college to get better grades. It's careless. You get my point. A lot of times that is an excuse. It's an excuse to make you and I feel more comfortable in our decision and in our habits that we have as a result of these self-imposed speed limits. Because truth be told, I can tell you this for me. Back to driving. If I drive in my, whatever vehicle I'm driving, if I'm driving over 90, I start to feel uncomfortable. If I'm driving over 100, I feel real uncomfortable. And if I get to 105, 110, I'm sweating bullets. Okay? Because I'm going past my speed limit. And I would tell you that being uncomfortable in most every situation, not all, but in most every situation in your life is really a sign that you have finally decided to go past that self-imposed speed limit. And my friend, that is a good thing. All right? So, before I close this week's podcast, don't forget there's a lot of multifamily resources and other development, personal, physical, etc. resources at darrengarmin.com. So don't forget to visit my website. Check out the resources. Make sure you take advantage of those free ebook downloads. Okay? Make sure you do that. And as always, I'm interested in hearing from you. Comments, questions, suggestions on this week's podcast and the topic of speed limits. Because, my friends, there are none. Have a great day, have a great week or weekend. Whenever you've decided to listen to me, we will talk to you later. See ya. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining Darren Garmin's Paranoid Banker Podcast. For investment questions, comments, or to get in touch with Darren, go to www.garminblog.com. Thanks for joining Darren Garmin's Paranoid Banker Podcast. For investment questions, comments, or to get in touch with Darren, go to www.garminblog.com.